All right, Unit 7, Lecture 3A, World War I. We're going to start. I'm trying to find your whiteboard. Put that up. Here you go, World War I. Okay, America's eventual intervention or involvement in World War I ensured its role as a world power for the remainder of the 20th century. All right, so remember we get our big boy pants after we beat up Spain in the Spanish-American War in 1898. Now we are a world power after World War I, okay? We really started an internationalist foreign policy, involvement in foreign affairs when we enter World War I, all right? Internationalism is a foreign policy based on heavy involvement in world affairs. The United States has generally followed an internationalist foreign policy from World War I to the present, okay? And while our entry into World War I ensured an Allied victory, the failure to conclude a lasting peace left a bitter legacy, a lasting mark or feeling, and assured that there'd be a World War II. Okay, as a matter of fact, when we discuss the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, we will discuss how it causes or is a cause of World War II. Okay, now I want you to get those down there. That word main, that's an acronym: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Those are the four main causes of World War I. I want you to remember that. Okay? So, these are trenches behind me, all right? World War I is going to use trench warfare a great deal. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so the causes of World War I are main. Remember these initials, remember this acronym. Main stands for militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Militarism is when nations build up their militaries. All right. At this time, Germany and England are building large navies, and Germany and Russia are expanding and increasing the size of their armies. All right, and much of this is about protecting their colonies, which is related to imperialism. As the nations build up their militaries, they form alliances to protect themselves. The Triple Entente, E-N-T-E-N-T, which is on your whiteboard, is the alliance of France, Great Britain, and Russia. The Triple Alliance is Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. All right, now I want you to remember those. You have to know both because they're going to shift later on. Germany, Austria will become the Central Powers. Britain, France, and the U.S. will become the Allied Powers. Okay. And alliances, when one nation gets involved in the war, all of their allies jump in too. So as soon as trouble starts between Serbia and Austria-Hungary, Russia's got to come in, Germany's got to come in, France has to come in, Britain has to come in, so everybody gets dragged in, okay? Imperialism is the nations of Europe are developing colonies and empires throughout the world, right, bullying those nations weaker than them and leading them to need more weapons, more modern weapons and more allies, and now they're not just coming into conflict with each other in Europe, but throughout the world too, okay? And then nationalism. Nationalism, love for one's country, we've talked about, but in Europe, there's many different ethnicities without their own countries, all right? Many different ethnic groups that begin pushing for self-rule or self-determination. An example would be Italy forms in 1870, right? The Italians wanted their own nation. The Germans unified in 1871. All right, they wanted their own nation. Now you have in the Balkan Peninsula, part of Austrian-Hungarian Empire, over there by the Ottomans and Austria and Greece, we have a push for independence and self-rule, especially from the Serbian peoples, okay? So World War I then is going to begin in Europe in 1914, and I said the causes are militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. The spark is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, and he's assassinated by a guy named Gavril Princip of the Black Hand, a Serbian nationalist group. This assassination is going to lead to Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire going to war. That was the Central Powers, with Great Britain, France, and Russia. Something to remember here, and again, it's a little confusing. The Triple Alliance turns into the Central Powers, and when you look at the map of Europe, you'll see why. And the Triple Entente will become the Allies. Most of the war is going to be fought on two fronts. The Western Front will be in France, and these fronts are just long, huge lines of trenches opposing each other. All right. The Eastern Front will be in Russia, though the Russians will drop out of the war in 1917 because of the terrible losses they're facing, the terrible disaster that is their nation, and the Bolshevik Revolution. Bolshevik is also communist. Okay, so the Communist Revolution, which we're going to talk about later on. All right. Horrific war. Lots of new technologies we'll talk about in a second, and the trenches.